Welcome back to another edition of Sawdust. So today we're going to give you the one-on-one on shiplap versus nickel gap. We'll do that at the Modern Farmhouse. But first we're going to head down to see Aaron, where we're talking about a wood roof on the grist mill, just like the one we're going to do here.
I'm Jeff Sweener of Sweener Builders. We have been building on the coast for over 30 years. Our team of craftsmen and design professionals are committed to delivering the best practices in custom home building. Our end product has to be beautiful, highly efficient, and use advanced building science to stand up to harsh coastal conditions. On Sawdust, we bring you behind the scenes to give you an inside look of how we do it.
So we're here at the grist mill. The general scope of work on the building is to replace the roof and the sidewall shingles. It's been a wood shingle building for some time. It wasn't originally, when it was built over 300 years ago, it would not have been shingled, likely historically, but over the years it's been shingled. There was a lot of discussion with the Historic Society and a few other people who were involved, Rhode Island Historic and National, as to what was the correct shingles to use on the building. Ultimately, collectively decided that the best way to go was just to keep it simple. It's a utilitarian building, it's a working building, it's never been a living space, so just to keep it as simple as it could be and put, simple shingles back on the building and just keep it historically period correct. The reason why we like to use them here in New England is because, one, they last, and two, they weather out nicely. You don't have to do a ton of maintenance to them if you don't want to. Some people do. You can do bleaching oil, you can pressure wash them, but you can put these on just the way they are and leave them and not do anything with them, and you get that sort of nice, what we New Englanders call Nantucket gray, that is a nice weathered out look that people like. It's naturally resistant to moisture and rot and decay. So you can put it on the coast, you can put it in a wet area, in a dry area, and it doesn't rot. Whereas some, to your point, some other wood, if it's left outside, pines will just rot away if they're not treated and painted and kept up with on the maintenance side. Whereas the cedar requires very little maintenance because it's rot and mildew resistant on its own. Mostly because of the acids that are in it, this tannic acid that's in the cedar, that allows it to repel a lot of the water so it doesn't soak up a lot of water like other woods do. So this is what we're using on the roof here. This is a red cedar shingle. It's called a Perfection. It's an 18-inch shingle. It's a good quality, simple shingle that you would have found on a utilitarian building like this. These have about a 3/8 butt, 3/8 inch butt at the bottom. And this is what we're using on the sidewall here. This is a white cedar, what's called a clear. So you can see it has knots in it, which are there on purpose. These aren't intended to be perfectly clear and not have any imperfections in them. They're meant to have imperfections. You can see in them, these are supposed to be there. It's, again, a utilitarian building that would have had not perfect shingles on it. So you can see the roofing shingle has a little bit bigger butt at the bottom here than the sidewall shingle does. The idea being that a roofing shingle gets more wear and will wear out faster than a sidewall shingle that the rainwater will just sheet off of. So the butt doesn't need to have as much thickness to wear away. And the reason why it's good on a roof is really more to do with the application than it is the material itself. When you put these on, you have only a third of it is to the weather. So the most important thing on the install side is to make sure that when you have this, that you don't have a vertical seam over a vertical seam. So if these are up on the building, you want to make sure that this next one that goes on covers this seam with this part and this part. You don't want to have this to be any less than 2 inches in either direction, like that. And then the next one would go here to cover this seam, and the next one would go here to cover this seam. And again, now you have this triple where you're covered here, here, and here. You have that same triple coverage again. And that makes sure that even if the water was to get between this seam, which it will, this shingle has all this space to pick it up, and the water just keeps running down. So when we get the last course of shingles on, there's one more cool thing that we do right at the ridge, along the ridge board, is before that final ridge board goes on, there's a piece of red copper that's bent to the angle of the slope of the roof. What it does is every time that it rains, the rain activates the sulfate, the copper sulfate, which runs down the roof and kills a lot of the microgrowth, a lot of the lichen and moss and mildew and other things from growing on the roof. So it helps to protect the wood shingles. You can see if you look back from the original, before we took the old roof off, that there was a whole lot of growth on there, which is why we do this, so that in the future going forward, there won't be that much growth or any growth on this roof. So it's nice to be able to do things in the community with the land trust, you know, to kind of give back and to make sure that these buildings can last, you know, for another however many 100 years. You know, it's a good thing for us, and also it's a nice kind of change of pace for us too, to do something that's a little bit different, a little bit smaller scale, but still a really cool building.
My name's Doug from Sweener Builders, and this is how I set up my bags when I'm framing. First thing I always keep on me is my impact driver. So I always use Scorpion 3-inch screws, number 2 square bit. I like the extension. It gives me a little bit of extra reach when I need to get in a tall spot. So with your impact driver, what you always want is extra bits. This one has a wide variety of Torx bits in case someone else on the job site is using different screws than I use. I also have a countersink bit just in case if I need to really hide a fastener, so it's not in the way of any kind of trim. So next, everybody on Sweener's crews, we all use Stanley Fat Max tapes. The reason why everyone on Sweener's crew uses the same tape is that when I pull it out and get a number, everybody else has the same numbers because all the tapes are made from the same company. So next, I always keep a Bosch laser measure in my pouch as well. This is what I use because I can get an accurate number when I'm trying to get a number by myself. So next thing I always keep in my pouch is my combination square. This is a 6-inch combination square from Swanson. I always keep this around. It's fantastic to get very accurate numbers with just your standard rule, or I can use it as a square and get very true square marks on a piece that I'm using. It's also very handy when you're doing window casings because you can set your 1/4-inch reveals in case you're doing window trim. I also keep my torpedo level, my razor knife, and I always keep a small Stanley hand plane in case you just need to plane down a material thickness just very slightly. So on this side of my pouch, I always keep a good amount of fasteners in both sides of the pouch, a good speed square, my nail sets, my bevel gauge, and my cat's paw. I also have my chalk box, a rag, and some glue. And I also keep electrical tape that makes a quick band-aid, which I oftentimes need. And lastly, my hammer. And that is my tool belt.
Back in Bonnet Shores, heading over to the Modern Farmhouse. We've got a clean, crisp look with nickel gap. Kevin's got a lot of hours into this. Let's go check it out. We're here at our Modern Farmhouse. We're installing nickel gap all throughout the living space, first and second floor. As you can see, it's cathedral ceilings, nice set of tower windows, ocean view. We are wrapping nickel gap all throughout the living space, around the chimney, and then around the sitting area into the stairwell, and it's going to pick up along with the first floor back up into the stairwell. So we're using traditional nickel gap. The material itself is 6 5/8 thick, face to face. And a lot of people get this confused with shiplap. The difference is that there's a built-in gap in between each course line, whereas shiplap overlaps. So nickel gap is a tongue and groove system. Tongue here, groove on the next piece. And they have 2 different shoulder heights, on the front and on the back, as you can see. When these 2 pieces click together, the back shoulders touch, and that leaves roughly an 1/8 inch gap in between the 2 pieces, roughly the width of a nickel. So the difference between nickel gap and shiplap is this back groove. On traditional shiplap, you will not have this, and it's just this front groove that laps over the tongue. And they usually touch in the front face. That's the difference between shiplap and nickel gap. So as you can see right now, we're about 2/3 of the way up our chimney chase. And the way that we are installing these are continuing course lines, inside and outside corners. As far as the outside corners, make test pieces, work your miter, get your length, make sure they work very well. Our outside miters are mitered, and our inside corners, we're producing a rabbet, so the next piece slides in, and hopefully with that, minimize any gaps that may come over time due to shrinkage. So we already have our piece cut and fit, and we're ready to install it. We're going to apply adhesive to the wall. And then glue to our miter. So as you can see, all around the living space, there is a cleat that's screwed to the walls. This cleat is on a laser level line, and I use it to pull measurements as I come around the living space, just to make sure that I'm staying true and level. This is going to become really paramount once I enter the stairwell and I start trying to connect course lines from the first floor to the second floor. As we come around this chimney chase, we started our outside miter. We're going to finish our outside miter. We have our test piece cut. Before we install this though, we're going to route a rabbet on the back side that will accept our next piece. And the way we go about doing that is we'll lay our piece into place roughly and scribe the next piece on that inside corner. So when we take that away, we'll use a template and a router that'll create a rabbet and make that inside corner nice and tight. And this jig will allow me to route this rabbet on each inside corner. Purpose of jigs are great. They're reliable, they don't move if they're well built, and you can repeatedly make cuts and they can be consistent and tight. It's pretty simple. Clicks right on to each piece, and I can move this jig left and right. I use this scribed line and I line it up with this shoulder. And the reason that I do that is this fence is what my router rides on to plow out that rabbet. It's dual-sided, so if I have an inside corner on the right side of my piece, I can simply slide my piece over and use this jig on that side. Ride it through. And there's your rabbet for your next piece. So we have our rabbeted backside for our inside corner. We have our mitered piece in the front. Glue and install. So in theory, our next piece will slide in nice and tight. We'll glue that guy up and install him too. Trying to make every inside and outside corner nice and tight with no gaps, ensuring that our wood is acclimated. We have our ACs running, and all the moisture in this house we're trying to get it out. We don't want any movement at all. That's why we're going to the extended measures of putting PL on the back side of our pieces. You know, really layering on the Gorilla Glue on our outside miters, shooting brad nails in to hold our miters nice and tight. 15 gauge right onto the studs. The idea is that you want this house to be quality, and the amount of work that we're putting into it, it should be top notch. This is unlike any house that I've ever done. I've more or less worked in only Craftsman style houses, so this modern feel is very different. Poses new challenges, but here at Sweeter, we're ready for it, and we're excited. Every day that we enjoy coming to work, especially these trim guys working on $1 million houses, it's a definite sense of reward at the end of the day that you're coming home and you're pouring your heart and soul into what you build. And at the end of the day, you can step back and have a sense of satisfaction with it.
So thanks for watching another episode of Sawdust. If you enjoy the close-up look of how we build on the coast, hit the like button, subscribe to our channel, and we'll see you next time.